Take 2. Hi, I'm Robert L. Brown, and today we're going to be pulling and putting in a new gasket kit, seal kit, on a power steering pump. This is my 1998 Lexus LS400 that I bought off of my father-in-law. Probably one of the best cars I've ever driven, and I have a power steering pump leak. It's been slow, and I've added the stop fluid to it with the stop leak, and that hasn't solved the problem. A few days ago I replaced the power steering high pressure line, thinking that that was the problem, but yet that was not the problem, and the leak did not stop, so it's still there. I cleaned everything, and we'll show you about that a little bit later on, and finally discovered that, no, indeed, it was my power steering pump that is leaking. I ordered from O'Reilly a seal kit, a seal replacement kit for the 1998 Lexus LS400. It's very common power steering pump. I think even some Toyotas will have this on them, and I know the Avalon, as well as perhaps the Camry of that same era. And it may run from 1996 to about 2000, given what I know today. So without any further ado, we'll go ahead and get started with the basics and show you exactly what works. All right, before we get started, I thought I'd go through some of the tools that I believe I'm going to need. I have over here to your left, this is a brake bleeding tool vacuum pump that we're going to utilize for sucking out all of the fluid and try to make the mess that we inevitably are going to make a little bit less. I have gloves that I wear. They're just the latex mechanics gloves, really the 9mm. You can get those from Harbor Freight Tools. Is a great cheap. They make the 9mm. I think it's $9 for a box of 50, so they're really great. I have the 10mm with an extension. This is going to be to pull off, especially the large plastic pan underneath, as well as some of the things that we have to get out of our way at the front of the engine. A couple of 3/8" extensions, a 12mm deep well, a 14mm standard 5-star 14mm ratchet, screwdriver, 17mm wrench, and then some snap ring pliers that we'll have to take out the snap rings when we get the pump finally pulled apart, and a warbly, or however you want to say it, just a simple adjustment tool there too as well to use just in case we have to snake and get to things. You'll see that this is relatively a fairly tight configuration. I also get some Ziploc bags so I can put bolts in the right place. If I can't put them back where they belong, then I've got a good clean place of storing them so I don't lose any parts in the process. Okay, here we're looking underneath the hood with, of course, all the plastic still in place. This is our power steering pump, and what we have to get to is right there. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to remove some of this plastic, get it up and out of our way so we can see what it is that we're looking at. Okay, here's what we've done is we've just removed the big air intake. It's just a single 10mm bolt that's right over by the left side of the battery. There's a plastic cover that just pops off and exposing that bolt. I put the bolt back into place, 10mm. Now what I'm going to do is take off the air breather and this all the way to the throttle body here. We'll have to take off the plastic or the harness right here, the electronics. It just pops out of place. Let's see if I can do that. It's pretty easy. It just presses down and pops out of place. There. And then it's going to have a few 10mm bolts here and here, as well as the 10mm bolt that connects to the throttle body here. Now that we've got our bolts loose, the front here to the far left-hand side here, as well as the hose clamp here, it's time to pull, and then the one here. So you've got 3 bolts. I've forgotten one. Let me get this one real quick. In the front. Pretty easy, and I'm just putting them right here in my fender well for right now. This tends to be a little tricky. You've got to wrestle with it just a little bit. You've got a hose right here, a backfill line for your coolant that you've got to kind of push it around, as well as getting all this out. So it's a little bit of a wrestling match, but you can do it. It's pretty easy. All right, there, that went easier than I thought. I was able just to push this back, pop it, it rotates up, and then it comes out. So it's pretty easy. And now we're getting to the nitty-gritty of everything. Of course, here's your reservoir. This is your feed. Here's your pump right here. The serpentine belt right there. We're going to have to take that off. The hardest part, too, as well, is that we're going to pull this off. This is our ABS brake sensor and control. We're actually going to pull this off. There are some 10-millimeter bolts on either side, and those lock it into place, and you have to be careful because these are, I'm not even sure what to call them. They just slide into place, and I'll show you in detail when you pull it off. So you've got to make sure that you pull those off, put them in a bag, keep them separate, because if not, they're just can't leave them. They're going to flop off if not. So those are the things we're going to do before we're prepared to drain our fluid off of here. There, I've loosened those, so now this unit will just slide up. And here's where it gets to be tricky. See how those work? It's on this little rubber bushing that sets into place. So there's both sides, the right side and the left side. The nut sits in this rubber bushing so it doesn't get any vibration. For right now, I'm going to put these two right here, but I am going to put them in a Ziploc bag where they're good and safe. This allows this unit to set up, and to pull over you have to bias it quite a bit. Don't worry, your lines have plenty of go with them, but that's going to allow us to get to the power steering pump right here, which is what we need to get to and to be able to get it out. The next part is to take apart the bracket that sits underneath it. This is where that 12-millimeter deep welt comes, because you've got 3 bolts on the bottom of this bracket holding it into place. So that's going to be the next thing that we take out. Quick tip, baby powder is absolutely outstanding. You want to put that on your hands before you put them in your latex gloves, and it makes getting your latex gloves on much easier. Here's the bracket that we're after right here, and it's got a little rubber seat. That's what this sits on, again, to keep it rubberized. It's kind of a little bit tricky. You've got your hose here. You've got 2 nuts right here. And what you're going to do is just get on them. A little tricky. In fact, let me get a short extension. I just got my shortest extension. Give me a little bit of room here to play with. There we go. The nice thing about these two is that here's one that's up just a little bit. Good. You can't see them, so you've got to make sure you've got a good pipe on it. And don't as yet. And that hose is kind of fighting you. We're going to try not to take that off. There it is. So we've got those loose, and these are nuts that are on studs, so it goes pretty easy. Now, before you go any further, you have to re-raise this, and you've got this little guy right there. get out, put them back up here, again, move my ABS brake sensor. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take them, both of them, all the way off, the nuts off. There those are. Let's go ahead and take them off. That comes off, and here's what the problem was. It's got a little indexing tab that slides into place, so you have to take those all the way off to get that to slide out. But there's your bracket there. Another tip, again, here are those bolts that hold the ABS in place, and I put them in a Ziploc bag, and it's going to get marked and go on my workbench for reassembly. Okay, I decided to go ahead, and I'm almost regretting it now, to take off the whole plastic work as well as the vacuum exchange chamber here, just to have better room and to give you guys a little bit better vision of what's going on and what we have to do. And here's where you have to be careful. Remember, it's a 30-year-old car. Okay, back to my workbench, and here's the unit itself. Now, apparently, I noticed that beforehand, here is a plastic nipple that should be fastened there, and it already broke off, and somebody had tried to silicone it into place. And in my haste, taking it off, I snapped this secondary nipple off that goes there. So when I'm at the parts store picking up my kit, I'm going to get some JB Weld for plastic and see whether I can get those pieces to work until I can order a new one of these, and probably from Rock Auto, because they just have the best prices, and a large part of our O'Reillys or Advanced or AutoZone, you know, they just can't compete with what you can get with Rock Auto. But if it works, and I've had success with this in other projects that I've done, that JB Weld for plastic will revulcanize that into place, and it should be perfectly fine. I'll also order new, or go ahead and get new replacement hoses for what fits to here, again, to make sure that I've got good vacuum, and that helps out, of course, with your everything, how the motor runs. So, okay, now I'm going to use the handiest gizmo anywhere, my hand vacuum pump. Because what I want to do is get out as much of this fluid as I possibly can, and I just put this in so I know that it's good fluid. So here I'm just putting everything into place where it sets and drawing that fluid out. And I'll get to a stopping point and reserve that, and then I'll make the determination on whether it's good. Okay, now I've gotten everything drained from my reservoir here. This is the return line, the low pressure return line, and I'm not going to worry about that. But I am going to pull the pressure line to the power pump from the top of the reservoir. I should be good there, so I shouldn't have any mess, but that will allow me to pull this hose up out of the way and then to continue to drain some of that fluid, so that when I undo the banjo line here, again, I'll have as least a mess as possible. A pair of standard pliers, grabbing both ends. Make sure that the cross section here is wide enough to grab, because it's a 3-prong and it'll get frustrating if you don't. You know what I mean? It's just a bit, you get frustrated. You want to make sure you get a good bite. It's one of those things where you want to hold your tongue right. Right there, I've got it. Now again, it's a 30-year-old hose, and I can feel that it's pretty strong in there. So I'm going to back this off just a little bit more. Got it where it's fighting me. Now it's good and out of the way. Now here what I'm going to do is get a screwdriver up in there and try to work that slowly out. You know, it dawned on me that I should have been putting a time on all of this, and I haven't. It's I guess I've been working for about an hour right to this point. I ended up getting the hose off. I've already vacuumed all of the fluid out. It's pretty hard. I'll probably go ahead and replace it because you can just feel it, right? This is just a regular pressure hose, but it's just rock hard over the H's. And I'll see when I get there. I think that the way that it bends, just a replacement, get the right size hose, will work just fine. I don't think it has to be a form-fitting hose, but I'll double check with everything with that. The reservoir is all completely detached now. One of the things I forgot to mention is that down here, you probably can't see it, I have a lot of my shop towels, just the paper cloth, blue paper cloth that you can get at the auto store, down to kind of help protect and make sure that none of this fluid get down to my alternator. I don't want to have problems based off of me working, because the alternator sits right below the power steering pump, which is just right here. I also take the time, I view this kind of as restoration, so I'm checking and cleaning all as I go. What I ended up doing, because this nipple here is so long and the hose was so rigid, it really didn't want to give me any flex. So I went ahead and removed, you've got one bolt down here on the left hand side, lower, right across from the nipple, one bolt holding it here, and then a third one back right on your strut tower here. This one can just be loose, and I took apart this, and then there's another bolt. This is the return line that's right here. I don't know whether you can see it. It's right here underneath where I've got the brake ABS system. I've also held the ABS system with a bungee cord, so it's held nicely out of my way. I put a nice towel over my bodywork and wrapped it around and clipped it on my inner fender well where I'm not damaging my paint or anything, but that keeps it nice and secure and out of my way as we're working here. Again, very, very tight quarters as it were. So now my pump is drained, my fluid is drained as far as it can possibly get to. The last thing I'm going to do before we jack up the car and take off the underneath plate, and you have to also be careful, this bolt here across had a brass fitting, again rubberized brass to keep it from having any kind of vibration, and that fell out, and I know that it's on my plastic down below, which is the nice thing about having that, so I'll retrieve that when I get back. So I should be ready now at this time to go ahead and get the serpentine belt off, go ahead and jack up the car and get my plastic cover pan pulled out. We're going to wash it, clean it, and then also from what I read on Lexus forum, which I'm a member of, and I'll post the link to this through the forum, the two 14-inch retaining bolts for this. There's one that I'm going to get to, a nut that I'm going to get to from the wheel, and two below, and I can get to those with the extension and the universal knuckle. I can get to those. So that's where we are now. So we're going to go ahead and here on the Lexus right above you is how the serpentine belt is run. You just want to look at it, make sure you're familiar with it, maybe take a couple of pictures. I always find that to be helpful just for reference. It's also going to keep its form. I'm not going to replace that today. Normally, if I'm at a position where I'm replacing it, I would replace it, but I think if I'm paying attention to, and I was so fortunate with this car because it was only serviced at the dealership there in Mobile, Alabama. So according to the records, this has been done with inside of about 25,000 miles ago when it got its annual tune-up and oil change. So I should be good and not have to replace it. And that's pretty easy. It's a 14 millimeter bolt to the tensioner. You're gonna pull that. I believe it's counterclockwise. I'll double check it and get back with you on the next second. Counterclockwise, relieve the tension, pull the tension off, and the only thing I care about is getting the belt off of here. I'm not even going to take it all the way off. I'm just going to get it off of this pulley so that I can get to the power steering pump and go ahead and get it pulled out. Again, I'm hoping that I do not have to take this hose off and drain my coolant. Gosh, I don't want to do that. It's such a mess. But we'll see. We'll see where we get. So that's where we're at right now. Well, that was real easy. Yes, indeed, it is a counterclockwise. So from noon to 10 is the way you want to go. The pulley is right here, if you can see right there by my light, so that made it easy. I just used a 14 millimeter with my 3/8 inch drive, and I put my cheater bar on it just to get it up here where I could get good leverage on it. Drew it back, pretty easy. Be careful coming back, because you just want to continue a little bit further, so you'll have to stretch. And I only had to get the belt just up and out of my way right there. So I'm perfectly fine with it resting in the fan area. So that means everything else should relatively be fairly easy, because it just runs straight from here over to my power steering pump. Okay? So the first nut that we're looking for is going to be here, and it's actually a nut at your access. And this is again what I'm reading on the forum. Should be accessed right here in the wheel somewhere. So let me find that first. We'll get to that one first, and then we'll jack her up. Okay, so this was the best angle that I could get with my camera. Here I am, and I'll make a complete list of all the tools that I use, because I ended up getting my 14 millimeter deep well. I've got about a 3-inch extension. Let's see what a 5-inch extension does for me. I think that might be even better. Oh, no, 5-inch won't work. It might be a 6-inch actually. I'm going to do my 3. I'm going to do my 3 and my little 1-inch, because I don't have a 4-inch. So that gives me a little bit better room. Absolutely, much nicer room. See, there I've got plenty. I'm going past my hose, not binding into my shield or anything. And I think I'm to the point where I can go ahead and remove my ratchet. And these always get to be tricky, because it is a nut that I'm taking off of my stud, and I can get back here with my fingers as I'm spinning that off. Not quite loose enough. Put it down a little bit more. And you want to make sure I'm pressing back on the nut. So there's the nut. We're not going to put that back, so that's going to get cleaned up and put on a bag. And you can see it's pretty gunky. So yeah, obviously I've been leaking some stuff there. I'm hoping that these views that I give you are good ones, so you can get an idea of what you're getting into. Right below, this is again the main feed. It goes to the reservoir. Right below this, there is 2 little nipples, and I hopefully, see, grab my light. Maybe that'll help. Maybe that'll help down there. There are these 2 little nipples right here and here, and they're both part of and tied to, it looks like, the vacuum system, or the vacuum advanced system. The first one, the outside one here, runs to your vacuum release on your plenum, and it's this hose right here. So it just loops back over the top. I believe, no, here's the little clip. So it clips here, up at the top, clips here, comes down to the outside one to your plenum, and it's up and out of the way. The other one, this smaller one that's on the inside towards the firewall, then loops up and goes into your vacuum advance box that I've taken off, that goes here, that I've got to repair. This end I didn't have to worry about. And here I just cleaned them up. Okay, so here you're facing really a 2-point problem. I'm trying to get my light where it works without blinding everybody. I've got my 3/8 inch socket, I've got a 12-inch extension, my knuckle, and my 14-inch deep well. And I can get to car, move my light out of the way. That's easy enough. Getting to the part, but my problem is how much bite I have to work with. I just don't have a lot, and if I extend my socket up further, then the problem is that you get your knuckle in such a bias that it really doesn't work as well as it should. And for when you're first breaking off, and again, 30 years that this hasn't been off, it's just virtually impossible to get to that way. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is jack the car up, take off my pan underneath, and then see about being able to attack them on the backside. And I'm not that worried. Is it going to cost me a little more time? Well, absolutely, because you're talking about, what, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, I think 15 10 millimeter combination of machine screws and bolts to get the bottom plenum off. I think there's another one that you have to take off, that I take off so I can get my jack underneath the front of the car and get the car up good and high where it's easy enough to get up underneath there, put it on jack stands, which I'll be doing, and then we'll see where we are. And plus that'll give me the ability to clean everything that I want to clean. I'm trying to be very meticulous in doing everything, and you'll see as we're putting the project back together how whenever I clean, like instance with this here, I'll take, just because I'm here and I can, I'll probably take some Scotch-Brite and just clean that, you know, there's my light, clean that up where it looks a little bit nicer. Right, here we are underneath the car, and as we can see, there is number 1. Let's get it focused. And there is number 2. And that black boot right there is the positive run from the alternator. And as you can see, the alternator sits right below where we're at. Now see, here's ultimately where one of the biggest problems, and why this is a problem you cannot ignore, is that if that fluid, and I was very fortunate, and that fluid was actually running down the banjo, coming all the way down to my line coverage. Here's my high pressure line right there, and dripping down along there, and then coming and dripping along the side here. So I was fortunate enough to where that leak was not apparently getting into my alternator. It seemed pretty dry. I've cleaned up a little bit, but not much, and it was pretty dry. So hopefully that will not add wear to that alternator. Certainly we could see that if that was spinning and getting fluid in it, it could cause all kinds of given issues. And there's tons of hot stuff around here as well, hence why this has heat shrink on the new power. And that's what this is that there, see it coiling up and around and coming back, that's my new high pressure line. And I did not have to replace that. That was not the problem as I had originally thought. So obviously I've been here before. So back to nut 1. Focus there. Nut 1 and nut 2. And I'm telling you, I'm not sure whether I'm going to get any better bite down here than I did above. But what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and unhook the positive cable from my battery so that I'm good and safe. And yes, I'll probably have to reset some things, hopefully not too many. I don't know. I've never unhooked a positive terminal from the Lexus before. I may do a little bit of research on that to make sure that there isn't anything huge that's going to be an issue. I doubt that it shouldn't, given the age of the car. Usually with the newer cars, I've seen where there's all kinds of protocol that you have to go to because the system will lock you out. Alright, I'm going to try to keep the camera good and still. I've done several different things that led me to being able to get to both bolt A and bolt B, and you can see bolt B there right above that little boot. See if I can get any closer. Now, right there, and bolt A is right there. They're both 14 millimeters. Again, I'm using a 5-star just so I don't risk. A 12-star works, but you know, I always get leery about spinning a cap and then you're just totally in trouble. Right, so the first thing that I did was I went ahead and removed the banjo bolt from the power steering pump, the high pressure line. Be careful when you do that. Originally there's going to be, the washers are going to have a common clip. That's easy to come off and it'll hit the ground if you don't pay attention. Like I said, I replaced that just last week, actually a few days ago. And the new one came with 2 brass washers, so I pulled those off and they're back on the bench. That too just gets to be messy with anything, especially jobs like this, to where there's no way of draining the system except for systematically working through it. It's just messy, so you want to make sure you're patient, you're taking the time to clean up after yourself, and you'll kind of see. If you look around, I mean, the plus is that you get to clean everything, and then you also get to examine and pay attention, you know, to all those little things that you don't get a chance to look at from time to time. And if I can get to it, it's just tight quarters here. Right here, right there are the nuts that hold the bolts that hold the high pressure line in place. There's 2 here, and then there's 1 on the other side, on the driver's side too as well. And you always want to be careful with these in that, remember, this is aluminum and you're still going into aluminum, so you've got to be very careful there with regard to that. Another kind of a safety tip that you want to make sure that you're aware of is that if you're using rags or paper towels, and it doesn't matter, to wipe up and to get this chemical, it's a polymer chemical out, you want to make sure that you lay those out flat for a couple of days and let all the fumes and the chemicals evaporate out of those. If you just wad them up and put them into a trash can, they can spontaneously combust. Some little problems that I've noticed, that like right here you can see these 2 lines here are just absolutely bare. So what I'm going to do is cut probably a little piece of my tubing that looks like this here, the vent tubing, and just slide over those just to make sure that they're protected, you know, against anything dropping in there or what have you. The nice thing is that bottom pan really covers all of this stuff, but like you can tell, I mean, it's easy to tell. You can look at all the wet surfaces. That's all from fluid that leaks from this kind of a job. So you want to make sure you're taking the time to clean everything. Like I said, I probably could have done what I did without taking that banjo off right away, but it was kind of nice to have the room. So how did I get to, let me see if I can get them back into focus. How did I get to the bolts there and there? Well, I ended up just using my 14 millimeter standard socket and my ratchet, no extension, no knuckle, no anything. And then I used my cheater bar on the extent of it, and I was able to get plenty of room down here underneath by the oil pan. Sorry, I got out of focus there. To break them loose. So they're broken loose now. So now I'm going to go on top and continue. I'll probably drive them a little bit looser down here, and then I'll go on top and pull them by hand, and we should, the next time I come back, should have the power steering pump on the workbench and getting ready to repair it, and then we'll reverse everything and button it all up. Alright, well, I goofed in the first place. The bolts that I was showing you, which this was up and underneath, were these 2 here, these 2 cat bolts. You do not have to remove these. It's actually these 2 bolts that you can access through the top that hold the actual bracket into place. These will come off, and they have to come off when you're replacing the innards, and we'll get to that point. But you don't have to take these off in the car, and those are the ones that I was getting to very nicely, again, just with my 14 millimeter my regular 14 millimeter, my socket, and my cheater bar from underneath, just like that. But it was not those that needed to be taken off for getting to the silly pump. What that incurred was, again, these two. I'm going to just take these out of the way because I've got to take them off anyway. It's actually these two here that are accessible, and on the reassembly I'll show you how to get to those. It was straightforward. It's like, well, doggone it, why isn't it moving? And then it just dawned on me, or I put two and two together, that it was these, and I was actually able to get to those because this is all sideways like this in the car. It's actually like this is how it kind of looks, and so these are accessible just from the top of the vehicle. So I didn't really have to get underneath the vehicle at all, other than to remove the plan and clean and all of those kind of things. So here we are. There's the pump out and on the bench. Now I'm going to choose not to take off. I don't think that I have to take off the pulley. I think that what I have to get to is actually underneath here, which is going to be, as always, kind of tricky because it's squirrely. So with inside of that, I'm going to use, see if I can get into my cabinet here, if I can. I'm actually going to invert it. You got to watch it. It's going to be leaking and everything, and clamp it from underneath my bench so that I can get to these top two here. So that's with my 14 millimeter. I'm of course going to use my cheater bar. It just makes it easier. Get them broke loose. And we'll go through all the torque specs and everything on the back side. Now again, what I've read so far is that when you're doing this disassembly, to get that clamp off, put that right there, back on top, and now these guys are pretty much ready to go. It's felt like, you know, like anything, you do it for the first time and you learn, and I didn't see anything clear with regard to what I found online, and maybe I just wasn't reading good enough, which is, you know, always a possibility. Another cap screw. They're just going right here on my bench. Those are all the same size. Here's the other one coming off. I'll try to fast forward this so it doesn't take as much time, but we'll see. And then there you have it. You pull it apart, and now you're starting to see on the insides here and some of the material that you'll end up being replacing as far as the seal of the unit goes. I believe that that's it for right now. So I'm going to run to, and I actually got the parts, was able to order them through O'Reilly's. Advanced Auto Parts saw the kit but could not order the kit. The same thing was true with AutoZone. I ended up, Napa wasn't open because they closed early when I called, so I didn't check with Napa, so I ended up going with O'Reilly's, and they were able to order it, and it's supposed to be here now. So that's what I'm going to do, is run and go get the kit, and then we'll work on here on the bench actually doing the rebuilding, replacing everything that we can replace as far as our seals go, getting everything cleaned, and then we'll be ready for the whole reverse process of reassembly. So, okay, we've used, and here I didn't have a part washer, so what I ended up using, just a chemical carburetor cleaner gallon jug, and I put it in a little old pan just to get everything, of course, all cleaned up and everything on the pump, so it's looking good coming in. Here is the kit that I got from O'Reilly's. So that looks about like a 16 millimeter, not a 14 millimeter. So that'll go on the tools you need list. Oh, larger than a 16. I'll bet you that's a 17. 17 has been a theme. 17, 14s, or 10s. And then a 17, there we go. So now the trick is locking this into place. Well, that went way easier than I thought. The pulley essentially just came right off. And of course, I want to make sure that you're aware of which way it came on. The splines here, closest, that's the back side. Here's the front side here. Yes. So because you want it definitely, it's got to go back on. That was my mistake, actually. It's this way. So back on the white mark, the splines closest here. This is the front. So we'll continue to clean. Again, getting rid of all that gook that saturated everything. So here we have the main back seal with a C-clamp right here, and I'm hoping that my will hope to pop off. So there's the C-clamp clip out of that. Of course, that'll be replaced with the new one here. Clean that up. That's where your clamp goes in. Now I didn't get, doesn't look like, that I got that seal with the kit. Here is the main seal that came with this kit. Obviously it fits over the trunk, but that's, as you can tell, way smaller. So that's a little bit of concern with regard to this kit, and making sure I got the right kit, because if it is indeed that main seal here that's causing my problem, I am not going to solve anything. I did not get that with this kit. And that is indeed the main, my big head out of the way. Here indeed is the main seal. Here. This is all casting, there's nothing there. It's that main seal. And this is what came with my kit. So see, I do have a problem with regard to that. So I'm going to probably regret, because I'm on a short time sequence, not replacing that main seal, but I'm not going to replace that main seal. So I'm going to put the C-clamp back in too. Okay, I've replaced the C-clamp back into the main part of the pump here. Again, if my main seal is the issue, I'm just a little bit in trouble, because the main that came with this kit was not that size. So I'm hoping that my main is good and that was not what was leaking. The next thing I'm going to remove is this point here, and this is where the banjo fitting sets into place, and that's a 27 millimeter. Well, I'm here. Remember that because it's a pulley nut, this is a right hand or a left-handed thread counter, so you're loosening it to the right clockwise and tightening it to the left. So here I had to go with my 27 millimeter. Okay, here's what I did was I put the pump with the fill nozzle down. And that way my nut is going to go to the left. I've got my big cheater bar, which is actually a part of my jack handle, and I'm putting all my weight here, holding it, and sure enough I was able to break that free using that. Pliers. Trying to keep my bench area relatively neat. So to date, for those who are keeping track, we're at a 10 millimeter, a 12 millimeter, a 14 millimeter, and a 27 millimeter, and a 17 millimeter is what you need. So there's that first one, and man, I'm telling you, I don't know whether I can see it. It's brittle. It actually broke when I was trying to pull it off. It's very flat. Looks to be this one here. It slides right back into place. Right there. So that would be that replacement. Again, it's just flat on the back side. Definitely could have been leaking. And there was a lot of gunk around there, so maybe that'd be the spot. Again, just meticulously cleaning everything. Making sure it is threaded correctly. Don't want to misthread anything, because that would just be terrible. That would put us in a terrible way. Okay. Here I'm just going to hold it, give that a good little wrench, and I will look up the torque specs for everything as we get closer to the end. The next one I'm going to do is this little guy right here. Now that shouldn't have anything, it should be just a press fitting, but we'll see. And we'll see, nice wrench it is. I think that's going to be a 16 millimeter because that was a 17, a little tight, a little loose. No? And that's the 16, so 17 it is. And again, I think what I'm going to do is put it to where I can bear my weight against it. And this is that little sensor that those two lines, air lines, went through. It should be just a regular compression fitting. It's exactly what it is. No need to have a gasket that goes into that at all. So that just simply tightens back into place. And always using leverage in my advantage. And here we have two, like that's going to be 12 or 13 millimeters. Let's see, it's 12. Yep, that's what it is. And there's a real small O-ring right there. And that looks to be this little guy in our kit here. Again, I'm using just a little pick. I'm very careful. And not to break it, just in case the new one isn't the right size or the right thickness. And again, very brittle. And not so smooth. Here we're cleaning everything up. Again, as always, just cleaning everything up. Everything on the top of the pump, areas we weren't able to get to. And this is, here's a little something I didn't get. Pay attention to how that's Alright, so we've got this, we've checked our main, replaced the new seal. So the only thing we have left, I believe, is this back section here. So I'll come back when I get that popped open. Okay, we just popped that off. It's got this funky spring in here. You have to be careful. It's got these two little tabs there, and those go right here. You'll see the little indicators. They just set right down in there, and that's going to give pressure. And here is the O-ring, or the seal ring in question, is right here. And again, just very flat indeed. And brittle. There that one is. So That's going to be any one of these three. It looks like they're all about, virtually identical. No, there's a little bit difference in thickness here. I've got two that seem about the same. Well, they're all three pretty close. So there it is, right on there. This all lines up. Oh gosh, you can tell, I can tell a difference there, that's for sure. Alright, and then these will get the cap screws back into place. There's the two long ones that I took out and I didn't have to take out that are going to go here and here. And the two other short ones that are going to go here and here. This is where that third, the bolt that holds it all into place, goes through. And that's it. I think now we're ready to put everything all back together. So, and I'll look up the torque specs real quick and then get back on the torque specs. Those will be in headers for everything. Okay. Okay, so I've double checked all the seals. There was one last C-clamp, the smaller C-clamp there. I replaced that. C-clamps are just a bear. That's all I got to say. Now those two nuts, like I said, I could get to them from here. Everything else is in place. They're just simply right there. And below it. Right there. So I'll just go on, we'll screw those in and torque those down, get our nut back on here, and get our serpentine belt back in place. Pretty straightforward. We'll have to go underneath and refish up the banjo bolt, and that's where we'll meet again. Like I said, those just fit right there, and I'm going to get to them actually just right here with that 14mm deep socket and just my 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch drive. Alright, I've got pretty much everything back together. The reassembly goes pretty quick. Serpentine belt was fairly easy. I've replaced this hose on the leading from the reservoir down to the pump, and I just got the right size hose. I didn't worry about the pre-bend. When it was cut right to length, it just fit right in there, no bends. High pressure hose was perfectly safe. The brake booster is back into place. I'm working on resolving the issues around the vacuum pump. I got some JB weld, a plastic weld, and that's what I'm doing, is re-putting on those tips to hopefully make that work. I'll probably end up next week ordering a new one of those and pulling it off and just replacing the whole thing and not worry about it anything happening. That's your vacuum system. These engines are so finely tuned. That's going to make a difference. I've cleaned everything off downstairs. The pump just looks great. I mean, it's pristinely clean. So if any of the one thing, that front seal starts leaking, I'll be able to see now because it doesn't have any gunk on it. So I'm hoping that wasn't the problem. I'm hoping it was one of those other seals. Again, all of them were brittle. They were flat. Just happens. 30 years old, happens with time. So hopefully that's the quick fix. If I had known that in the first place and not replaced the high pressure line, I would have only been out $27 for the kit, plus the power steering fluid, plus the time that I've spent. And I've spent a lot of time today. I won't kid anybody. I stopped, had dinner, took my time, cleaned as I went, was very meticulous, which is, part of the hobby of having these. Again, even though this is my daily driver, I want it to be in tip-top shape, and I want it to look real well. I never can see myself selling this car. Such a fabulous automobile. So that's it in a nutshell. I've cleaned everything underneath. I'm getting ready to take it off the jack stands, lower it. I'll jack it back up on the driver's side jack area, put a stand back underneath it so that I can go ahead and put the underneath cover on, and keep my fingers crossed that we've done the right things here, and we'll solve the problem. And if not, there'll be obviously a part 2. Again, this is Robert Brown, Robert L. Brown. I love being a member of the chat room. Or the Lexus Club. Hopefully you'll find this somewhat interesting, if not overtly long. So until the next project, I think from here, it's pretty straightforward. Just button some things up. So until the next project, you guys take care, enjoy driving, and as always, be safe, wear your safety belts, don't text, pay attention to the road. All right, take care now. Bye-bye.